I've got the Miami wear going.
Oh yeah.
The only difference is I'm outside, so it's even reasonably excusable. I should be inside.
Are you gonna start? Are you gonna start sounding like Pitbull?
Probably worse.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
What is it, Mister Three
so
Hundred
fucking
Five?
impressionable.
Is that what the?
Yep, that's him.
I don't know why I know that.
Well, because you're an American.
True. True. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a very good answer.
I do my hair like a lady now too. I don't know how Miami that is or not. I don't think it is, but
You do it the same way I do. A little
my
bun
little
in the
lady hair.
little bun in the
I'm
back.
pushing it. I'm pushing it way up to the top though.
I do that sometimes. I don't have
Hmm.
it that way right now because it'll give me a headache.
Yeah.
Okay. A
Tell you what, you're
political
curing my
system.
headache just looking at you.
What's up, baby? Okay. Looks like we are live on Facebook. What is up, fine
Yeah.
Facebook people?
Hey, Facebook.
Let
For
us.
any of the members in the inside listeners group of Jason Stapleton's group, let me know if this is a financial strategy that Jason recommends. I think it is, but I just want to double check with people who would be more equipped to answer the question. Selling audio visual equipment for cash and then rebuying the same equipment on credit for more money, but financing it over 5 years so that you have cash in hand. That's something that Jason recommends, I'm sure, right? Isn't
Oh
that
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
that's
actually
a strategy?
if you buy into his like inner circle of the inner circle, that's what it's all built around. It's
Oh
just
yeah,
arbitraging rental equipment.
it is. I kind of have done that forever. Like I sold a set of speakers, and then I bought new speakers that were the same kind, but I financed them, so it made me feel like I made money, even though I definitely obviously didn't. But
Live.
that's the state that things are at, folks. So with that in mind, please, if you'd like to support the show, first of all, join our supporting listeners group. That's number one, and you can hear more inappropriate humor for starters, and you can have a nice warm feeling of supporting your friends. And then number two would be for all of your CBD products, because I know that anyone who's listening to this show at least dabbles in the CBD. And so, why not head over to Paloma Verde for your CBD needs? So, Paloma Verde CBD.com and use promo code KING to get 20% off. And tell
25% off.
Carlo 25% off. Good gracious.
Yep.
And tell Carlos that you say orderly.
And he'll say it right back to you. Carlos is a good man.
Yes, he will.
Yeah. PalomaVerdeCBD.com, promo code KING, 25% off any order over $75. And they've got a new website. New website looks absolutely snappy and crisp and beautiful, just like Carlos and Vanessa as well. They're a very beautiful family. They've got a sweet little baby, and I always notice that kind of thing now. Having mine, it does something to your brain. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, they have a kid. Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. It
Mm-hmm.
just it's something that you notice that you wouldn't have noticed before. Speaking
Mm-hmm.
of making money, we are if you for anyone who listens to this within the next couple of days, uh,
Yep.
depending on what kind of car you have or what your status is with it, go to Carvana.com or Vroom.com or GiveMeTheVin.com or CarMax.com or I don't remember. There's Auto Leasing Go or something like that. Any of these different services, and just punch in the details of your car and have them make an offer for it and see if that offer is compelling to you, because we are coming up to the end. 3 years ago, we leased a couple of Honda Accords, 2018 Honda Accords, and we're coming right to the end of the lease term on one of them. It's next month. Leased them for 36 months, 10,000, 12,000 miles a month. I don't remember how many. And so we've got relatively low miles. We've 28,000 miles, so we're like 8,000 miles under the the allowed amount for with a month left to go. But it is the used car market is absolutely completely bonkers bananas out of this world right now. So our payoff, I'll just say it, our payoff on this thing here is 15.7, and CarMax is offering us 23.8 for the car. So the used car, we're making $8,000 on a 3-year-old Honda Accord Sport. Apparently this is just how things are right now. So there's a website I use called leasehacker.com because I'm going to hack this next lease and make sure we get a good deal. And so I've been frequenting that blog for a while, and everyone on there is all in a situation like this. We're just over the course of the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden the offers that Carvana and Vroom and all these different sites, all their offers have just spiked by a few $1,000s. And it's because, in large part because of this chip. There's a factory that makes a bunch of chips, semiconductors for the car, for all kinds of different cars. It burned down or something like that, and it's caused all sorts of supply and demand distortions all across the market. It's rippling through everything. So new cars, the price is spiking right now. So if you're trying to get into a new car, get in there sooner rather than later. For most cars, but for used cars, the price is spiking also. So there's kind of a sweet spot here for the next, I don't know, week, 2 weeks, something like that, where you can get out of your old car and get into a new car as the used car market spikes and before the new car market takes off. So yeah, just a shout out to anybody out there. We've got one other car that we have at the shop right now, getting a little body work done, and then when it comes out, I'm going to do the same offer on it and see if we got some equity in it, and going to get out of these things ASAP and into something new. So there's your little money making tip of the day. You can also do that, or you can arbitrage camera equipment with our Miami friend Steven over here, Steven Pitbull Messina.
And if so that way, if anyone's looking for a 2014 Kia Optima that has had the engine replaced, and has holes in the leather seats, oh, go fuck yourself. And yeah, has like despite backing in everywhere, has been scuffed all over the bumpers because people in North Carolina have absolutely no concept of how to drive anything. Then holler at your boy. We can do this cash.
What year is it?
2014.
It could be. They're pretty desperate for cars right now, so it could be worth throwing up there. And you might, at the very least, it might be worth more than you thought it was.
Has about 1 billion miles, but only 500 million on the new engine. So
that's a perk.
Yeah, that's a perk right there.
The new engine isn't as old. It's just nicely managed.
That's right. I'm going to go there right now while we do Neo-Reactionary Reading Rainbow.
Yeah, Neo-Reactionary Reading Rainbow. So day before yesterday, when we drove our car out to the body shop, we went to one all the way back in the valley where we used to live. And as I was driving, I was thinking about the next Patchwork chapter we were going to be reading. And I was like, I want to read it ahead of time. I want to know what we're going to be reading. And so I went through and I actually just listened to the rest of the Patchwork series using a YouTube channel that does some just like canned readings of it. And it just keeps getting better and better. This is probably my favorite series of his, I have to say. Now going through it again, it's just so much fun. And the Mises to Carlisle one is great, and I really like that one. But this one is just, he really outdid himself when he wrote this. And it's not. It's not the most well-known of his pieces, I don't think. Most people, when I hear them talk about his stuff, either they talk about Gray Mirror, his new blog, or they talk about maybe Gentle Intro or the Open Letter. You hear people talk about Mises to Carlisle. You'll really hear people talk about how Dawkins got pwned, but you don't really hear people talking about Patchwork that often. And
some people don't like it. Yeah,
I think probably part of it is because it's not it's not like he's describing the way it's actually going to be. So I think for a lot of people, they're kind of like, oh, the thought exercise and it isn't that interesting to me if, it's not ever actually going to be realizable in the way that he's described. And I think that there's parts of it that can be realizable in the way that he's described. But I think the biggest thing is that it gets you thinking about these problems from a different perspective, because it deals with the problems on the ground in kind of a unique way that you probably wouldn't have thought of. And that will open your mind up to different possibilities. And I think it'll get you looking at this governance problem. You realize that the corruption of the state is an engineering problem. It's not a moral problem. It's not about finding the most moral system of government. It's about finding the system of government that violates human rights the least and that people are the most incentivized to participate in and to participate in for the good of everyone else who's participating in it. Then when you start thinking about it from that perspective, then for me, I'm kind of like, I have no idea where to start. So I'm willing to read just about anything. And then he just happens to be very entertaining, a very entertaining writer. What I call it is like, it's like his writing is an art form. It's not just about communicating information to you. It's about painting a picture for you and entertaining you as you go. And I think that makes it almost more educational because it makes it stick for me better. So I like part of me being afraid of us, like we call ourselves neo-reactionary, and we don't necessarily want to call ourselves neo-reactionary. I also don't necessarily want to paint myself as a Moldbug stan. I am a Moldbug stan, but I don't want people to think that I 100% identify with everything he says and I don't identify with anything he doesn't say. I think that there's aspects of quite a few things that I definitely disagree with him on. And if somebody came and made a better case and proved why he was wrong in a bunch of places, then I would be perfectly willing to be persuaded in another direction. He just happens to be the person who's been the most persuasive and made the most interesting case for this sort of stuff to me to this point. And if you are tired, if you've gotten bored of him or you think that he gets stuff wrong or whatever, then I'm absolutely happy to hear what you have to say. I'm very interested to hear other people's perspectives and whatever you might think. If you think that he's gotten something wrong or that there's a better way to do it, then I'm happy to hear that. So go ahead and leave us a comment. Also like the video, share it, and then subscribe to the channel because we don't just do live readings. We also do just ordinary commentary on news and politics and religion and philosophy and all kinds of different stuff. And we're just doing this live reading series we're starting with Moldbug, and we'll do other bloggers and authors and stuff too, I'm sure, in the future. But this format I really enjoy this format. We have a lot of fun with it, and we've been getting a lot of good feedback that people enjoy this live reading style thing where it's kind of like an audiobook, but someone is reading it and commenting on it in real time. So anyways, I think that was all that I wanted to touch on before we got started. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I didn't. So just $1,200 for a QSC cardioid sub. Think pounds. I've got an offer that may be taken care of maybe this weekend. But if anyone wants to jump in there, and I can do a package deal with the Kia if you happen to be interested in both.
Yeah, you get a just buy the equipment, and then he'll just throw the Kia in for free, and you can use it to haul the equipment away. That sounds like a good deal. Mark Metz says, have you listened to Yarvin's interview on the Subversive podcast? It's his most recent, recorded just before his wife's passing, but published after. He drops a lot of white pills in it. I actually subscribed to her. It's Alex Kashuta, I think is her name. She's Romanian. I actually subscribed to her Patreon for a couple of months just to get access to that episode and listen to it, get early access. And I really enjoyed it. I need to go back and listen to it again because it's very, very full of content. He touches on a lot of things and covers a lot of ground. There's like a Q&A that she does with him afterwards with some of her patrons, and there was some outside-the-box questions that they asked him. So I definitely look up. Her name is Alex Kashuta. I think it's spelled Kashuta. She's a Romanian chick. She's very, very based. And she's got a podcast called Subversive, and she's interviewed some very interesting people, especially in the dissident right, I guess people have called it. People that they're not establishment, they're not conservative or anything like that. The pejorative would be the alt-right, but that's just such a useless term.
I called my mom a political dissident because she sort of referred to someone referring to her, or someone might refer to her as a conservative or whatever. And I was just like, yeah, but I mean, you understand why you're not, or whatever. Because she'll just talk about how retarded Trump is and everything, and or any number of other things. And she's like, well, what am I? And I was just like, well, I think you're just kind of a political dissident.
What'd she think of that?
She got such a kick out of it. she just loved it. I couldn't think of any better way. She's pretty adorable.
Your mom's a peach.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, one other cool thing. We just passed 400 subscribers on YouTube, so we are almost halfway to our initial goal, and we
Alert the
haven't even gotten a
media.
strike yet. So I don't know. I think we might make it. I think we might get to 1,000 subscribers before we get our channel deleted, unless we really start kind of losing
Yeah,
our mind.
we gotta dial it up here.
Yeah, we need to start living on
And
the edge a
plus
little
now,
more.
with 400 subscribers, I imagine we're gonna start to be on some people's radars. When they see a number that high into the triple digits.
I mean, have
Yeah.
you ever been in a room with 400 people? That's a pretty big crowd of people, and now
Small crowd.
they all like bow at our feet and worship us. So I mean, anybody that came upon that, they would know that we mean business, that we're
Right.
something to be contended with. All right. Yeah, Moldbug talks about dating in that episode, and it's very interesting hearing his perspective on dating and marriage, and because Alex happens to be pregnant while she's interviewing him, so they touch on family and wives and that sort of thing. So it's very, very, very interesting. Yeah, he's his typical like like programmer mind talking about dating. So there's a very healthy dose of Spurg in it, but it's Moldbug, so it also has kind of like a quirky charm, and it's very interesting. So okay, let us get on to Chapter 2 of Patchwork, a political system for the 21st century. This chapter is called Profit Strategies for Our New Corporate Overlords. Mencius Moldbug, November 20, 2008. I fear Chapter 1, after promising an absence of Grimm, dumped a can of it down your shirt. I apologize for this, dear readers, and also for the awful, incendiary closing cliffhanger. But fear not, we will answer the question. And for those of you who missed episode 1, the cliffhanger was that there's going to be people in this new joint stock corporation, San Francisco, that's now privately owned by a joint stock corporation called Frisk Corp. There's going to be people there who do not meet the standard to live there. The standard being anyone who isn't dangerous to others and anyone who can afford to live in San Francisco. He says it would also be nice if they spoke English, but considering the exigencies of the second constraint, they almost certainly will. Frisk Corp may also import menial labors, as Dubai does today, but they are not to be confused with the actual residents. Here we face a slight predicament. There are quite a few people presently in San Francisco who do not meet the second constraint, are pretty iffy on the first as well, and have no labor skills to speak of. So in other words, they can't afford to live in San Francisco. They're probably not safe for others. They're dangerous around others, and they may not speak English, and they have no labor skills. So what do you do with someone like that? He says, sell their slums out from under them, obviously. Demo everything, spray for roaches, rodents, and pit bulls, smooth the rubble out with a bulldozer or two, and possibly a little aerial bombing. Erect new residential districts suitable for Russian oligarchs. Next question. And we killed Steven.
I mean, you just see this like long-haired programmer, and he talks like all academic, and he just has that like cadence, like Thaddeus Russell's like same kind of deal. And you hear something like that, and you just get reminded, oh.
This guy's pretty based.
Yeah.
But I love that at the end of it, the last one is erect new residential districts suitable for Russian oligarchs.
Oh, how perfect is that?
He says, but where do they go? Since their customer service contract gives them the right of exit, these people, call them Bezonians, can of course emigrate to any other realm of the patchwork. This presumes, however, that said realm is willing to accept them. And why would it be? If our design does not provide for the existence of a large number of human beings whose existence anywhere is not only unprofitable, but in fact a straight up loss to that realm, it is simply inconsistent with reality. The design faces an existential challenge. In Chapter 2, we'll present the shocking but ineluctable solution and figure out the second half of our security problem, the relationships between realms. So that's how Chapter 2 ended. So, back to Chapter 1. He says, I fear Chapter 1 after promising an absent, or Chapter 2. So now back to Chapter 2. That was Chapter 1. I fear Chapter 1 after promising an absence of Grimm dumped a can of it down your shirt. I apologize for this, dear readers, and also for the awful incendiary closing cliffhanger. But fear not, we will answer the question. UR has never been an easy ride, but I really don't mean to abuse the customer in this way. If nothing else, it repels the good and attracts the bad. But unfortunately for those who are bored with these warm, gaseous exhalations, I've come to the conclusion that it is simply not possible to get into the meat of a UR post, UR being Unqualified Reservations, the blog he's writing on. I've come to the conclusion that it is simply not possible to get into the meat of a UR post without a fresh introduction to the anti-democratic and, frankly, authoritarian philosophy of government for which we are so notorious. You do know that just reading this blog makes you a bad person, don't you? Unless you're a hardened longtime reader, UR is just off your political map, and anyone can click on a blog for the first time. Besides, one can never be too deprogrammed. Most people, when they take a whack at designing a government, an engineering task at which all God's chillins just naturally excel, tend to ask themselves, what should the government do? Of course, this is the wrong question. The right question is, what will the government do? A great example of asking the right question but still getting the wrong answer is Federalist Number 10 by James Madison. It is almost funny to read Madison's bogus remedies for the well-known ills of democracy, such as national size being an infallible nostrum against political parties, not unlike perusing some medieval pharmacopoeia which prescribes dried wolf dick for breast cancer. For example, most democratic citizens are firm believers in the concept of limited government. In the all-curing magic black bag of democracy, limited government is the first-line ointment. Apparently, a government can prevent itself and its successors indefinite from doing bad things, just by writing a note to itself that says, don't do bad things. Swallowing the red pill, departing the matrix, and donning our alien-detecting Ray-Bans, we realize at once that no government can limit itself. Limited government is a perpetual motion machine, a product axiomatically fraudulent by definition. In any human organization, final authority rests with some person or persons, not with any rule, process, or procedure. This is not to say that there is no distinction between Washington and Pyongyang. What we call the rule of law is a good thing. But if you have an efficient engine, there is no point in marketing it as But if you have an efficient engine, there is no point in marketing it as an infinitely efficient engine. The noble ideal of limited government, or rule of law, is a piece of political camouflage, behind which lurks a useful and effective, but certainly imperfect, and not even slightly divine, corporate design, that of judicial supremacy. In a sentence, juridical supremacy is judicial supremacy. I really like this point that he says here. If you have an efficient engine, there's no point in marketing it as an infinitely efficient engine. So I don't completely get yet what he's directly applying it to, but just that idea that when you have a good thing, market it as a good thing. Don't market it as like an amazing, absolutely fantastic, stupendous, best of all time thing, because then you make the good thing into a bad thing. So, rule of law. So he says what we call the rule of law is a good thing. But if you have an efficient engine, there's no point in marketing it as an infinitely efficient engine. So it's good to have rule of law, but to have self-enforcing rule of law, now you're like, okay, well, rule of law can enforce itself to some extent, but it can't enforce itself absolutely 100% to the point where you don't ever have to have anyone enforcing it. What limited government ultimately, he's saying, if you trace it, eventually what limited government is just a rule of law for judicial supremacy, or it's just a fig leaf for judicial supremacy. Judicial supremacy is a management design in which ultimate sovereign authority rests with committees of arbitrators who are experts in proper government procedure. The design certainly has its merits. If implemented well, for example, it can reduce personal graft among employees to negligible levels. Hardly a high standard, but I am happy to be governed by a regime which has achieved it. But ultimately, judicial supremacy can become arbitrarily evil. All it takes is arbitrarily evil judges. Is judicial supremacy, for example, superior to military supremacy? This is like asking if a rowboat is better than a sailboat. For some purposes it is, for some it isn't. In peacetime, you would probably rather have the former. If you want to win a war, you probably want the latter. Neither, however, can be said to be in any sense predictable by design. A judicial critocracy or a military dictatorship may deliver good government or bad government. Either can be nice or tasty. In the end, the words judge and general are just words. It is not at all difficult to imagine a process of political evolution by which they swap meanings. And a critocracy is a reference to critarchy is another word for it, which was a system of rule by biblical judges in ancient Israel, started by Moses according to the book of Exodus before the establishment of a united monarchy under Saul. Okay, Teufelsdruck's philosophy of clothes has never been said more. Teufelsdruck's philosophy of clothes has never said more. Can a general command in a black robe, or justice be laid down in camo? Most assuredly, and the devil too, in either, but more of him in short. Under the clothes is a man. Who is he? How got he here? What does he at his desk? None of these having much to do with your design. The philosophy of clothes is, he links to Wikipedia for Sartor Resartus, which means the tailor retailored. It's an 1836 novel by Thomas Carlyle. The novel purports to be a commentary on the thought and early life of a German philosopher called Diogenes Teufelsdrockh, which translates as Zeus-born devil dung, who is the author of a tome entitled Clothes, Their Origin and Influence. Teufelsdrock's transcendentalist musings are mulled over by a skeptical English reviewer, referred to as editor, who also provides fragmentary biographical material of the philosopher. The work is in part a parody of Hegel and of German idealism more generally. Back to Moldbug. Is it possible to design a structure of government which will be stable and predictable? Hopefully, of course, stably and predictably benign. History affords no evidence of it. But history affords no evidence of semiconductors either. There is always room for something new. The key is that word should. When you say your government should do X or should not do Y, you are speaking in the hieratic language of democracy. You are postulating some ethereal and benign higher sovereign, which can enforce promises made by the mere government to whose whims you would otherwise be subject. In reality, while your government can certainly promise to do X or not to do Y, there is no power that can hold it to this promise. Or if there is, it is that power which is your real government. Your whining should be addressed to it. The neo-cameralist structure of patchwork realms, which are sovereign joint stock companies, creates a different kind of should. This is the profitable should. And neo-cameralism is a Moldbugian neologism for the state as profitable corporation. It's reference to the cameralism of Frederick the Great. It's discussed further in Chapter 3. The profitable should. We can say that a realm should do X rather than Y because X is more profitable than Y. Since sovereign means sovereign, nothing can compel the realm to do X and not Y. But with an anonymous capital structure, we can expect administrators to be generally responsible and not make obvious stupid mistakes. Another way to say this is that a realm is financially responsible. The general observation here is that, to paraphrase Tolstoy, financially responsible organizations are all alike. By definition, they do not waste money. And paraphrasing Tolstoy is from the Anna Karenina principle, which is all happy families are alike, each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. So he's saying that all financially responsible organizations are all alike. All financially their irresponsible counterparts do, and by definition, there are an infinite number of ways to waste money. So that the irresponsible counterparts can waste money in all kinds of different ways. The responsible ones all act the same way. Think of a rope. A financially responsible organization is a tight rope. It only has one shape. But if there is slack on the rope, it can flap around in all kinds of crazy ways. It is immediately clear that the neo-cameralist should, the tightrope, is far inferior to the ethereal should, the magic leash of God. Typically these days, arriving in the form of vox populi, vox dei, or as a cynic might put it, vox populi, vox preceptoris, which means preceptorus, actually. Preceptor is a teacher, instructor, commander, ruler. So the voice of the people is the voice of their teacher, or voice of their commander. Given the choice between financial responsibility and moral responsibility, I will take the latter every time. If it were possible to write a set of rules on paper and require one's children and one's children's children to comply with this Bible, all sorts of earthly principles for good government and healthy living could be set out. But we cannot construct a political structure that will enforce moral responsibility. We can construct a political structure that will enforce financial responsibility, thus neo-cameralism. We might say that financial responsibility is the raw material of moral responsibility. The two are not by any means identical, but they are surprisingly similar, and the gap seems bridgeable. When we use the profitable should, therefore, we are in the corporate strategy department. We ask, how should a patchwork realm, or any financially responsible government, be designed to maximize the return on its capital? For our overall realm design, let's simplify the Anglo-American corporate model slightly. We'll have direct shareholder sovereignty, but with no board of directors. The board layer strikes me as a bit of an anachronism, and it is certainly one place stuff can go wrong. Deleted. And I also dislike the term CEO, which seems a bit vainglorious for a sovereign organization. A softer word with a pleasant Quaker feel is delegate, although we will compromise on a capital, putting a capital D on delegate. And we can call the logical holder of each share its proprietor. Therefore, a patchwork realm is governed by a delegate, who is the proxy of the proprietors, and can be replaced by a majority of them at any time and for any reason. The delegate exercises undivided sovereign authority, as in divine right monarchy, i.e., in English, total power. The delegate is always Jewish. This fragile-looking design, that's a joke. The fragile-looking design can succeed at the sovereign layer because, and only because, modern encryption technology makes it feasible. I should be clear, too, that was a Moldbug's joke. I'm not the one who said the delegate is always Jewish. It's Moldbug. So once again, you have the nerdy programmer guy who comes out of nowhere with a wisecrack that is fantastic. Okay, so this fragile-looking design can succeed at the sovereign layer because, and only because, modern encryption technology makes it feasible. The proprietors use a secret sharing scheme to control a root key that must regularly reauthorize the delegate. And secret sharing, again, as you referenced last time, is its methods for distributing a secret among a group of participants, each of whom is allocated a share of the secret. The secret can be reconstructed only when a sufficient number of possibly different types of shares are combined together. Individual shares are of no use on their own. So it requires everyone's participation because each of them only has a piece of it. And then a root key, for those who don't know, is in cryptography and computer security, a root certificate is a public key certificate that identifies a root certificate authority. They are self-signed, and it is possible for a certificate to have multiple trust paths if the certificate was issued by a root that was cross-signed and formed the basis of an X509-based public key infrastructure. So it's a certificate authority. Okay, so the proprietors use a secret sharing scheme to control a root key that must regularly reauthorize the delegate, and thus, in turn, the command hierarchy of the security forces, in a pyramid leading down to cryptographic locks on individual weapons. And there's a footnote, and the footnote says, if, given the realities of firearms construction, this strains credulity, consider instead the possibility of cryptographically locked robot armies. If the delegate turns on the proprietors, they may have to wait a day to authorize the replacement, and another day or two before the new delegate can organize the forces needed to have her predecessor captured and shot. Fiduciary responsibility has its price. The modern cryptography was not available to the most serene Republic of Venice. That modern cryptography was not available to the most serene Republic of Venice does not mean that they wouldn't have used it if they had had it. Since we have it, we can use it. Since the algorithms date to the 1970s, it is not surprising that history has no record of cryptographic organizational structures at the sovereign level. Since the neo-cameralist design for a sovereign corporation depends on them, it's not surprising that history shows us nothing of the kind. While as a reactionary I believe that the legal and political structures of old Europe, so often defamed as feudal, are a treasure trove of sovereign organization, and if restored in toto tomorrow would prove on balance a vast human boon, it is a slight overstatement to assume that everything old is beautiful and sweet and anything new must suck. For simplicity, our realm will do its books in gold. Another footnote. Or more likely in Bitcoin, but Patchwork was written before Bitcoin's January 2009 release. Incidentally, it's worth noting that the monetary theory underlying Bitcoin was first published in 2006 under the pseudonym John Law by Moldbug himself. The spectacle of a sovereign corporation that maintains accounts in its own script is a fascinating one, at least from a financial perspective, and we cannot write it off quite so casually as yet another 20th century monstrosity. It is not impossible that fiat currency can be made to turn a buck. It is unlikely that the proprietors will want their dividends in it, however. And who are the proprietors? Anyone. They are anonymous shareholders. It may be desirable, though, for a realm to enjoin its residents from holding its shares. It is not normally necessary for a company to refrain from serving its shareholders as customers, but a sovereign realm is not a normal company. A resident shareholder has a conflict of interest because he may have an opportunity to use the power of his share to promote policies that reward him directly but are not in the interests of his non-resident fellows. The effect is small, but better to rule it out. Another footnote. The footnote says, for a contrary view developed along the same lines as Patchwork, but emphasizing the value of citizen shareholders and the resulting multi-generational continuity, see completing the groundwork of a feudal hierarchy of sovereign corporations and evolving a feudal stack of sovereign corporations. Fortunately, the joint stock design is flexible enough to admit both possibilities. And there's links to both that are there. So if you go to the unqualified reservations page that I'm reading, which I'll put the link to in the description of the video when we're done, you can go down to the bottom and look at footnote 4 if you want to read those. We'll also assumption to be justified below, that realms exist in a competitive market in which residents can easily take their business elsewhere if they don't like the service. Given this setup, let's say you're the delegate. Your patch is the city of San Francisco, and your realm is its new corporate overlord, Friscorp. Friscorp is yours. Not that you own it, of course, just that the owners have hired you to run it. First, let's enumerate the basic principles of sovereign corporate management. Principle 1. The proprietor's sovereignty is absolute. Securing it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, is the primary fiduciary responsibility of the delegate. Lose the patch in the realm is worthless, and so are the shares. Everything else, even profit, comes after security. Principle 2. A realm is a business, not a charity. Its goal is to maximize its discounted return on investment. If delegate and proprietors alike somehow manage to forget this, in the long run their realm will deteriorate, develop red giant syndrome, and become gigantic, corrupt, and foul. It may even turn into a democracy. Principle 3. Except in cases where it conflicts with the first and second principles, don't be evil is always good business. Think of your realm as a hotel. As Mark Twain once put it, all saints can do miracles, but few of them can keep hotel. And while many hotel keepers can do miracles, few indeed are saints. But all are nice to the customers, at least the 99.999% of customers who feel no need to start torching the drapery. While our test case, San Francisco, is hardly representative of the average stitch of Earth's skin, it will probably be harder to manage than most, being both urban and urbane. So how, as delegate to Friscorp, would you run your town? Let's start by assuming a steady state system, ducking as usual the problem of getting from here to there. There are two basic tasks of a realm, managing the residents and surviving in the big bad world. Let's take these one at a time. Any hominid, hominoid, or other bipedal ape present on Friscorp's patch is a resident. The basic idea of a realm is that the proprietors profit by providing the residents with a pleasant place to live, be happy, and of course be productive. Basically, if you're not nice to the hominids, they'll leave. The proprietors won't have a business, and you won't have a job. It is difficult for those of us who grew up under democracy to juxtapose this fact, which is an incentive rather than a constraint, with the fact that as delegate of Friscorp, you exercise undivided sovereignty over San Francisco. You have no constraint. Your residents are as ants in your kitchen. No combination of them can possibly oppose you. Not even if they all come together in one big angry mob, screaming, jumping up and down, waving their little signs, and throwing rocks and gravel. All will be massacred by your invincible robot armies. And then there's something here in French that I have no idea how to pronounce. Pour la canaille, faut la mitraille. No idea if that's accurate. For the mob, use grape shot. The quote is usually attributed to Arthur Wellesley, 1st Duke of Wellington, though Carlyle attributes it to Victor Francois, 2nd Duke de Broglie. And even without any such cause for complaint, if it would be profitable to just spray the whole city down, exterminating the current crop of worthless bipeds and replacing them with a more upscale crowd, you will. And if you don't, your proprietors will fire you and hire a new delegate with a clue. Terrifying, at least from the San Franciscans' perspective. But we can nip this grimness right here. It won't be profitable. Why exterminate when you can enslave? It won't be profitable to enslave either, but see further. Once again, Patchwork residents do not rely on imaginary constraints to feel secure in the icy, lethal jaws of a sovereign state which could slaughter them all. They rely on real incentives. While the incentives may not be 100% reliable, they at least exist. A realm signs a formal contract or covenant with all responsible residents. The deal is this. The resident agrees not to misbehave, and the realm agrees not to mistreat him. Definitions of each are set down in great detail. In case of conflict, the realm appoints an arbitrator to hear the case. All cases can be appealed up to the delegate, who has the power not only to interrupt the covenant, but also, being sovereign, to suspend it. This process is called law. It is not a novelty. A realm may adopt and or modify any of the old continental, British, or American systems of law. If a common law system is adopted, precedent should be rolled back to 1900 at the latest, and probably more like 1800. The democratic era has corrupted everything, law being no exception. The covenant has two sides, but the sides are not equal. The realm, having sovereign power, can compel the resident to comply with all promises. Since San Francisco is not an Islamic state, it does not ask its residents to agree that their hand will be cut off if they steal. But it could. And San Francisco likewise can promise not to cut off its residents' hands until it is blue in the face, but since it is a sovereign state, no one can enforce this promise against it. For exactly this reason, however, San Francisco must guard its reputation. It does this by living up to its promises as much as possible. If it is forced by unexpected, understandable circumstances to invoke force majeure, people will probably understand. Force majeure being it's a common clause in contracts which essentially frees both parties from liability or obligation when an extraordinary event or circumstance beyond the control of the parties, such as a war, strike, riot, crime, epidemic, sudden legal changes, or an event described by the legal term act of God, prevents one or both parties from fulfilling their obligations under the contract. In practice, most force majeure clauses do not excuse a party's non-performance entirely, but only suspend it for the duration of the force majeure. Okay, and I need to get a drink. Okay. So San Francisco must guard its reputation. It does this by living up to the promises as much as possible. If it is forced by unexpected, understandable circumstances to invoke force majeure, people will probably understand. If it breaks its own promises all the time and for no good reason, amputating hands willy-nilly after swearing up and down that life and limb are sacred, it will not be viewed as a safe place to live, and no one will want to live there. Congrats on your new burned-out ruin. And Burned Out Ruin links to a Time magazine story about Detroit. The views, at least, remain spectacular. Your replacement can probably find a way to salvage some tiny fraction of his employer's capital by turning the place into some kind of eco-park. To live in or even just visit San Francisco, a hominid must either sign the covenant or be a dependent of some guardian who has signed the covenant. I.e., your hominid must either be responsible or have someone who is responsible for it. San Francisco is a city, not a zoo. The signer of the covenant, the responsible party, is the subject. In the covenant, the realm promises to protect the subject's person, property, and dependents. It indemnifies the subject against crime and pays unrecoverable tort claims. There is no such thing as perfect security, and bad things can happen to anyone anywhere, but Friscorp considers all disturbances of the peace to be its problem and its fault. And, most important, Friscorp guarantees your right to depart from the city with person, property, and dependents, unless, of course, you are fleeing legal proceedings. And maybe even if you are, of course, you would have to find another patch willing to take you. In return, the subject promises not to disturb the peace of San Francisco, or to permit his or her dependents to do so. I favor the ancient Roman design in which the guardian is responsible for the actions of his dependents, and holds the authority of patria potestas over them. Patria potestas means it is the power of the head of a Roman family over his wife, children, agnostic descendants, slaves, and freedmen, including originally the right to punish by death, and always embracing complete control over the limited personal and private rights and duties of all members of the family. So he says that Moldbug says he prefers the ancient Roman design in which the guardian is responsible for the actions of his dependents and holds the authority of patria potestas over them. Authority and responsibility, as usual, being unified. Not quite a fractal or hierarchical sovereignty, but close. Friscorp has no business case for interfering in its subjects' family lives. Residents of a patchwork realm have no security or privacy against the realm. There is no possible conflict in the matter. That not being malignant, the government is not a threat to its residents, and since it is sovereign, they are not a threat to it. This absence of conflict allows the government to enforce a much higher level of peaceful interaction between visitors. That's a very interesting thought there, that authority and responsibility have to be linked together. You can't have one without the other. If you have authority without responsibility, then that's a recipe. That's corruption, basically. That's power that you haven't earned. And if you have responsibility without authority, then you can't actually fulfill that responsibility. You have to have the authority to be able to fulfill it. So the two have to go together. And it's interesting too that he notes, just kind of in passing, that being sovereign means that no one is a threat to you, that none of your subjects are a threat to you. So to have a sovereign, that sovereign has to be untouchable. It has to, there can be no threat to it, or there is no sovereign. But there always will be a sovereign. The question is, will that sovereign be formal and publicly acknowledged, or will that sovereign be informal and not actually have the responsibility that goes with the authority? All residents, even temporary visitors, carry an ID card with RFID response. All are genotyped and iris scanned. Public places and transportation systems track everyone. Security cameras are ubiquitous. Every car knows where it is and who is sitting in it, and tells the authorities both. Residents cannot use this data to snoop into each other's lives, but Friskcorp can use it to monitor society at an almost arbitrarily detailed level. In return, residents experience a complete absence of crime, at least at the level of present-day Japan, and ideally much lower. San Francisco has no need of Yakuza. Residents also experience a complete lack of security theater. To board a plane, they walk right on. Friskcorp has no reason to tolerate the presence of dangerous or unidentified hominids at large in its city, any more than it would tolerate leopards on the loose. Strong identification and tracking of residents also mitigates one of the most obvious problems with the patchwork approach: the inconvenience of constantly crossing borders in a world of small sovereignties. What does a resident do if she lives in San Francisco and wants to drive to Berkeley, which is a different country? Is there a checkpoint on the Bay Bridge? Not at all. She just drives to Berkeley. Her car knows who is in it, and the authorities of both San Francisco and Berkeley know where it is. If she is for some reason not authorized to enter Berkeley, all sorts of alarms will flash. If she persists, she will of course be detained. Having a scalpel, Patchwork feels no need to whack anyone with a club. One way to see internal security in a patchwork realm is as a compromise between two sorts of Orwellianism. In the sense that the realm is, effectively, omniscient and omnipotent, it would fit most people's definition of Orwellian. In return for its Orwellian powers of observation and action, however, Friskcorp has no interest at all in the other half of Orwellianism, the psychological manipulation of public opinion as a device for regime stabilization. The realm cares what its residents do. It does not care what they think. It is difficult to express the importance of this freedom to those who have found a way to live without it. There is one problem, though, which is the problem I mentioned in Chapter 1, the problem of adults who are not productive members of society. In our little newspeak, we call them wards of the realm. A ward is any resident who is not capable of earning a living, is not accepted as a dependent by any guardian, and is not wanted by any other patch. The initial conversion of our present democratic and of course completely dysfunctional San Francisco into the realm of Friskcorp will produce quite a few wards, at least relative to the number we would expect to emerge in a healthy society. But there will always be black sheep, and there will always be wards. As delegate of San Francisco, what should you do with these people? I think the answer is clear. Alternative energy. Since wards are liabilities, there is no business case for retaining them in their present ambulatory form. Therefore, the most profitable disposition for this dubious form of capital is to convert them into biodiesel, which can help power the Muni-buses. Okay, just kidding. This is the sort of naive Randian thinking which appeals instantly to a geek like me, but of course has nothing to do with real life. The trouble with the biodiesel solution is that no one would want to live in a city whose public transportation was fueled, even just partly, by the distilled remains of its late underclass. However, it helps us describe the problem we are trying to solve. Our goal, in short, is a humane alternative to genocide. That is, the ideal solution achieves the same result as mass murder, the removal of undesirable elements from society, but without any of the moral stigma. Perfection cannot be achieved on both these accounts, but we can get closer than most might think. The best humane alternative to genocide I can think of is not to liquidate the wards, either metaphorically or literally, but to virtualize them. A virtualized human is in permanent solitary confinement, waxed like a bee larva into a cell which is sealed except for emergencies. This would drive him insane, except that the cell contains an immersive virtual reality interface which allows him to experience a rich, fulfilling life in a completely imaginary world. Footnote 6. This virtual option, while obviously a bit trolly, describes a real problem, which Moldbug discusses further in The Dire Problem in the Virtual Option and Sam Altman is Not a Blithering Idiot. He also addresses it in one of the more recent Gray Mirror articles that he wrote. He goes into a pretty elaborate discussion of various aspects of that within the context of something else. But the first time that I read this and I got that part about the biodiesel and just converting them to alternative energy, I was laughing my ass off. He's fantastic.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about with when he goes into different virtual solutions for people. I mean,
Yeah.
he really the thing that has you second guessing whether it's a joke or not is just the fact that it's like an entire novel, basically.
Yeah.
In terms of the length of the description that he goes into, it's like certainly no one would carry out a joke this long. Oh, okay. Apparently he is.
Yeah.
That reminds me, like to this day, I'll still have, if I have like a friend or two from high school, they'll reach out and just like say something to me, as if they're like treating it like it was a fact. And I was like, oh no, I was kidding. I realized that I also keep jokes kind of going for uncomfortably like years, So
that's great.
So respect is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so virtualized human in permanent solitary confinement, wax like a bee larva into a cell which is sealed except for emergencies. And it's an experience a rich, fulfilling life in a completely imaginary world. The virtual worlds of today are already exciting enough to distract many away from their real lives. They will only get better. Nor is productive employment precluded in this scenario. For example, wards can perform manual labor through telepresence. As members of society, however, they might as well not exist. And because cells are sealed and need no guards, virtualization could be much cheaper than present-day imprisonment. I like virtualization because it can be made to scale. I don't think there is any scenario under which San Francisco is burdened with more than a few thousand wards. Many other regions of the Earth, however, contain large numbers of human beings whose existence may well prove an unequivocal liability to the owners of any ground on which they would reside. If so, they can be virtualized, creating giant human Wachowski honeycombs of former Bezonians, whose shantytowns can be cleared and redeveloped as villas for retired oil company executives. Of course, virtualization is a drastic alternative and itself unlikely to happen. Charity is just too popular these days. Before anyone becomes a ward of the realm, any person or organization is free to adopt him as a dependent as a matter of mutual agreement. His new guardian is A, responsible for his actions, and B, free to tell him what to do. The ideal relationship for any attempt at rehabilitation. It's basically what the Salvation Army does now, I believe. If all else fails, there's always the honeycomb. I think this problem gives a flavor of the kind of thinking we would expect in an entrepreneurial sovereign. The result is quite foreign to the democratic philosophy of government, obviously, and it takes some imagination to picture. But I seriously doubt that many who had a chance to live in this future would have much interest in restoring the past. Libertarians in particular may have a great deal of trouble understanding how an authoritarian, omnipotent, and omniscient sovereign can be expected to create a free society. The fundamental diagnosis of libertarianism, that today's democratic governments are much larger and much more intrusive than they should be, is obviously correct. The remedy proposed, however, does not have anything like a track record of success. In fact, I believe the libertarian opposition to sovereignty, dating back to Locke, is a major cause of modern big government. Our present establishments, not to mention our tax rates, dwarf any divine right monarchy in history. The attempt to limit the state, if it has any result, tends to result in an additional layer of complexity, which weakens it and makes it more inefficient. This inefficiency gives it both the need and the excuse to expand. So we may ask, why does the post office suck? Not because it is sovereign, but because it is not financially responsible. Its freedom to be wasteful and inefficient is what gives it that familiar Aeroflow feeling. The bankrupt airlines, such as United, feel more like Aeroflow every year. When we postulate a sovereign authority which is financially responsible, like a patchwork realm, we have no reason to expect it to display these pathologies of government. In particular, we cannot expect it to waste resources in order to pointlessly annoy its residents, a form of inefficiency in which democratic regimes seem to positively revel. The sight of a financially responsible sovereign, even the thought experiment of one, is a good lesson for libertarians because it reminds us what a healthy government actually is. Today's democratic megastates are to healthy sovereigns as liver cancer is to liver. If you find liver cells invading every other organ and crushing them all into goo, it is only natural to think that the cure might be a drug that was lethal to liver cells. But you actually need a liver. You need to kill the cancer, not the liver. And that is the end of that chapter. It's a short one.
We did it.
We did it. It was very good. And this is good. We'll actually get finished a little earlier than we usually do, because I got a little alert on Ecamm Live when we started up that said I had a limited time to... It said I had 2 hours and 53 minutes of interview time, which is having a second person in the conversation. But that's not exactly... I think that might be an hour and whatever half of 2 hours and 53 minutes is, because I think it's when there's two people in there, it goes twice as fast. So we'll finish a little early today, and that's not a terrible thing. Let me come check the comments and see what you guys are talking about. It has been hopping in here. Okay, Crawford Glissadevil says, Dave Smith sounding like he'll make a return for LP presidential candidate. I have not thought about Dave Smith in a very long time. I haven't thought about anything related to the Libertarian Party or anything related to that in a long time, and it's been kind of nice, honestly. I guess that's not going to last. We're definitely going to have to think about and talk about them more going forward. Anyways. Okay, so... Mark said he can't wait to see Steve's juicy, meaty thighs. So maybe you need to do a milky thigh display.
Yeah, what I'm wearing right now, unfortunately, is not conducive to a milky thigh showing.
Oh. Is it what you're wearing or what you're not wearing?
Be sure to tune in next episode. In the early part of the live stream, there'll be thighs for days.
So you have to show up early when we go live on Monday at around 1. You'll have to be early. Which reminds me, in a couple of weeks, Amy and I are going to be driving up to Washington, taking Eastwood up to meet my family, which is going to be very interesting. We're going to do a road trip to and from Washington from Southern California with an 8-month-old who is not particularly fond of his car seat. So we're gluttons for punishment, apparently. But we'll have to figure out how we're going to record this around that. But that's something we can solve that in the supporting listeners group.
I was gonna just live stream my thighs for 2 hours. So if you want to see that, leave it in the comments. That's right.
Yeah, give us throw us some comments on the episode and tell us what you think we should do. One option is live stream Steven's thighs for 2 hours. What other good ideas do you guys have? We got our guy
option right now.
We got our guy Popular Liberty in here. He says it's accurate pricing. Marketing a good thing as a perfect thing is a false price, which is a market inefficiency. That's a very good point. I like that. Marketing a good thing as a perfect thing is a false price. So if you say that you have a good government, but you say that you have an infinitely good government, then you're creating a market inefficiency because the price for an infinitely good government is much, much more than the price for a good government. So if people are trying to buy an infinitely good government and they're paying for a good government, you've created a market inefficiency. That's a very interesting way to look at it. A market needs accurate prices in order to function. This is true for a government too. You can pay no taxes in Somalia, but that price of zero has a lot of problems baked into it. A good system of government should have a price on it and a profit incentive. This is why corporate realms work very well. You're putting a profit incentive on being a good government. Therefore, the should and the will line up, and that's the essence of it in a nutshell. That's the problem that we're trying to solve is the problem of profitability. Right now, it's profitable within the existing governmental structure to be corrupt. It's profitable to sell out your power to the highest bidder. And there's a whole bunch of different networks of incentives that are promoting corruption and tyranny and organized crime, and these are all features of a democratic system. This is, if you want those things, create a democratic system. These sorts of things just wouldn't last in really any other system of government because it would be self-destructive very, very quickly. Any sort of like tyrannical king who abuses his subjects, you're going to turn your land into North Korea effectively pretty soon. So you have to be pretty psychopathic to get to that point. And in the modern era, that's another thing. When people look back at monarchies of the past, they say, oh, well, people could be trapped and, how many people would get hurt and they wouldn't be able to get away because you get a guy that's just so evil. But the thing is, for a guy to get to that point in this modern era, in the era of the internet with social media, and anybody can get a message anywhere in the world immediately, it's going to be very, very difficult for any sort of totalitarian guy like that to elevate himself to that point, because particularly in a culture where everything's obsessed with human rights and where even like raising your voice at someone is considered violence. It's just the idea that in a system like this, it would somehow be the most evil, corrupt guy would rise to the top and rule with an iron fist for generations just doesn't, there's nothing rational or logical about it whatsoever. There would be a strong incentive for people to, not only would there be a strong incentive for people to not be evil, there would be a strong incentive for people in a position like that to be incredibly charitable, for their entire identity to be the good stuff that they do for other people, the care that they provide for the downtrodden and the unfortunate. There's so many ways that you can structure a government under that premise. It's just a matter of engineering it. Let's see here. Popular Liberty said, oh, what's up, John? Jon Hartmann in there. I'm going to listen to your guys' episode. Jon Hartmann and Popular Liberty did a really good conversation. I'm assuming it's really good because it's the two of them. And I've got it in my to-do list to watch that. I want to see what you guys had to say. Popular Liberty says that virtual option is going to be a problem. A world of imagination is going to be attractive to more than just the economically disenfranchised. Yeah, that's true. It's there's going to be a lot of people who would get pulled into something like that. I don't really think that the virtual option would ever really be feasible. I think on a limited scale, there's going to be people who will volunteer for it. But what you're going to see is you're going to. I think we're going to start having a rise of the family, like people like extended families starting to get together. And first it's going to be people like ideologically similar people are going to start trying to cluster in specific areas and try to keep together and keep to themselves. And just what naturally will happen is that they'll begin to intermarry, and you're going to get communities that are operating on a family basis, generations down the line. And once you get the extended family model revived, then that sort of person, the sort of person that just can't work and they can't take care of themselves, there's nothing that they can do, they just naturally fall on the care of other family members who take care of them, and they hire someone to work with them and care for them. And that would just be how it is. We have those sorts of people now, but we pretend that they're capable of taking care of themselves. They just need to have welfare from the government. So then they're just getting a check to go do whatever they want with it, and they don't have anyone who will look out for them or give them guidance or take care of them in any sense. And so it's much worse for them. It's better to just recognize that these are people who aren't capable of self-ownership. They're not capable of caring for themselves. There's always going to be a class of people like that in a society, and the goal is to create incentive structures that will care for them. They'll have to trade their freedom in return for it. They can't be free, because what does free mean? They don't have the judgment capacity or the physical capacity to be free. So it'd be cruel to make them free. It's better to put them in a position where someone else is responsible for them and someone else takes care of them, which is essentially like a parent type of role. So you have to have some sort of a sponsored parent for them.
That said, I am currently searching for a family. If anyone would like to take me in, I'll gladly trade my freedom. Or option B, if anyone figure out how to get me unemployment, because seems like everyone else can figure it out, but boy, I sure can't. So leave either one of those in the comments. And again, the Kia and the QSC sub package deal.
You keep running into this whole issue of having an income and having revenue and stuff just keeps getting in the way of you getting your unemployment.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some issue that has left me on pending for like I guess over a year now, so that's good.
All right. Well, it looks like okay. Popular Liberty said Yarvin's strategy. Yarvin's strategy of authoritarianism is good, but it's going to have a whack-a-mole problem with archetropism. A well-crafted patchwork won't need authoritarianism because it has lined-up incentives of archetropism in economics, just like how a regular corporation doesn't need Orwellianism. Right. Yeah. And this is again, like I said at the beginning, this isn't Moldbug describing exactly how it's going to be. He's kind of he's changing the baseline of the conversation and beginning to hypothesize, okay, if this is the sort of model we were working with, what would need to be baked into that model to incentivize everyone to participate in a way that everybody else would want to participate? Because that's ultimately what you're going for. You're trying to create a game that everybody wants to participate in. So you have to have just the right rule structure that they do. There's a book that I just downloaded called it's Finite Games and Infinite Games. There's two different types of games. One is finite, which means it has an ending and will ultimately have a winner. And the goal of playing the game is getting to the end and declaring a winner, and you ideally being the winner. And then there's infinite games, which, as the name says, they never end, and there is never a winner. And the goal of the game is for the game to keep going, to keep playing. And that's basically you're trying to engineer a government structure that can become an infinite game, where it just the goal of it is to keep participating and keep playing in it. And there's never necessarily a winner at the end because everyone is bound by their obligations to each other. So just me fulfilling one set of obligations just entitles me to take on another set of obligations. It doesn't get me to a point where I no longer have obligations. Even the delegate, nobody has more obligations in this scenario than the delegate. The delegate has the most obligations. They're obligated to the highest level of responsibility. Nobody has more responsibility on their shoulders than the delegate, and so the delegate isn't free unless he has no conscience. He's not free. He's enslaved to his realm, and he can check out of it at whatever point, but he's going to have a lot of strong incentives not to, because eventually, actually, I just realized as you go through a system like this, honor would become a big thing. Like, who's going to be the delegate? Which person is going to be qualified to be our delegate, and who's going to hire him? Well, it's only you're going to want people who have demonstrated. You're giving this person absolute power, so you want someone who's demonstrated that they're responsible and worthy of absolute power. So there's going to need to be some way of evaluating their honor, their honor, how honorable they are. So they're going to have to know people. So network is going to be really, really important. You can see all this stuff is all you're kind of bringing back like an aristocracy and a knighthood and all these sorts of things are. You're bringing back like an old dynamic, but and I don't know what you would call it, an old dynamic, but it's in a new model. You're putting it in new skin, but it's a lot of these same old concepts. Real quick here, Popular Liberty said, yeah, the honor system. Family is a much better structure, yeah. And I think that's where, if you're wanting a takeaway from something like this for just you yourself to apply to your own life, it's family. Invest in your family. If you already have one, then invest in it more. If you don't have one, invest in creating one, in finding and creating one. And there's all kinds of different ways to do that. Again, it's an engineering problem. Everything's an engineering problem. Just engineer it. Figure out what you want, figure out what you have to do to get it, and then do the thing to get it. I don't know if Steven has frozen up here on your guys' screen or not, but he's frozen on mine. Are you still there?
Oh, I'm definitely there.
Okay,
I just yeah, for some reason it is very freezy visually. Hopefully it's on a good frame.
It's been very just completely blank. You're sitting there with you just look like we're doing like a police interview or something, and there's the one cop who's like talking and gesturing and asking all the questions and stuff, and the other cop is just sitting there with his arms crossed.
I feel like
staring.
the audio pushes it through somehow. I don't even know if that makes any kind of sense, but I noticed that like when I talk, it kind of unfreezes.
Yeah, that's true. It
So
does.
I'm not sure.
Interesting, but there's a little bit of a delay. Okay.
Yeah, the delay is pretty spicy.
Well, this is just absolutely gripping TV. So this has been a shorter episode, but we got through chapter 2. Next week we'll do chapter 3. I almost thought about trying to do both in one today, but the next one is decently long. It's not super short, so we'll do the next one on Monday. Reminder, support our sponsor, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Use promo code KING, 25% off any order over $75. They've got really good gummies. I just placed my order. They have something there called the Unregistered Combo Pack that they put together in honor of Thaddeus Russell and his podcast Unregistered. So you can get the tincture and the soft gels and the gummies, I think, all together for a big discount. And then if you use our promo code, you get an even bigger discount. They've also got a salve, like a muscle rub. They've got some really good stuff, and they're really good people. It's great to support a family-owned. Speaking of family, it's great to support a family business. And like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. And don't follow Steven on Twitter. He doesn't want you to. He doesn't have a social media presence. He barely even exists, but he graces us with his presence every Monday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific. Pacific is the only time zone that exists. If you have another one, you don't matter. And we appreciate you guys, even the ones who are in the other time zones. Thank you for stopping in and joining us in this episode. And join us again on Monday. Toodaloo.